Hello BookTube, Sarah here, and welcome to my channel. Today I'm coming to you with my weekly reviews for December the 1st through the 7th. So I read 3 books this week and I enjoyed all of them, so that's always great. The first 2 books that I am going to share with you were sent to me both by the publisher Harlequin because I am participating with them in the holiday blog tour. So this is very exciting. Lots of different holiday books. There are lots of different bloggers that are doing this, that are participating in this. They're doing reviews and excerpts and all kinds of fun things. So these books were all published later this fall or in the fall. So I will give you guys the publication dates on all of these as well. But for the first 2 that I read, the other 2 that I am going to be reading for this, I'm going to be posting next Sunday. So they are split in 2, so I do hope that's okay with all of you guys. But these are great holiday recommendations that I do hope that you will pick up this holiday season. So the first book that I want to share with you is called Coming Home for Christmas by Rayanne Thane. This is the 10th book in the Haven Point series, and this came out on September 24th, 2019. So this is the story of Elizabeth and Luke. This is a great, really feel-good, spirit of the season Christmas story. So Luke and Elizabeth are married. They have been married for over 10 years. But about 7 years ago, Elizabeth took off in the middle of the night and has never been seen since. And as our story opens, Luke is about to actually be charged with her murder because they've never been able to find the body, but they're just going to assume. A lot of people in town, of course, have been talking. What happened to her? Where did she go? So, you know, talk turns into speculation. And he ends up, a lot of people in town are whispering about the fact that did he kill his wife? And is that why no one's ever seen or heard from her since? So it turns out that she was actually found about 4 months prior to the story starting by Luke's soon-to-be brother-in-law, who's an FBI agent. And Luke just figured, I'm not going to go after her because there was obviously a reason as to why she left, and if she wants to come back, she knows where to find us. Well, now that there's a possibility that he's going to be charged with her murder, as the story opens, he heads out to pick her up. And their story continues from there. I don't want to say anything more than that. It was a wonderful story, you know, of 2 people, in a way, a second chance romance, but with this great kind of mystery element to it about what happened to Elizabeth. You learn what happened to her slowly as the story progresses and why she didn't come back and, you know, why she's kind of been where she's been. And they have 2 children, and how she kind of not only rekindles her romance with her husband, but also how she builds back that relationship with her children. So again, fantastic story. I absolutely recommend it. I gave this one 4 stars. I thought it was wonderful, and I highly recommend that you go ahead and check it out. The second book I want to talk to you guys about is A Wedding in December by Sarah Morgan. I loved this so much. This came out on October 31st, 2019. I buddy read this one with Lindsay from The Wandering Reader. Lindsay also from Lindsay Reads. I will leave link to both their channels in the description box below. And Alana, who used to have a channel, and I know not just only me, but there's a lot of other people who'd like to see her channel come back along with her sisters, Chloe. So yeah, this was an absolutely fantastic story. It wasn't a contemporary romance per se, even though there was romance in the story. This was definitely a women's fiction novel. So this is the story of Maggie, who is the mom, and her 2 daughters, Rosie and Katie. And Rosie and Katie are, excuse me, fully grown adults. And what they don't know, the daughters don't know, is that Maggie and her husband, Nick, their dad, have been separated for about 6 months. And as our story opens, Maggie gets a call from Rosie, the younger of the 2 daughters, to say that she's getting married to a man that she just met about 2 months earlier in Colorado. So Maggie and Nick and the girls originally are all from Oxford in England. So it starts off with Maggie and Nick flying across to America along with Katie, the older sister. She is actually a doctor. She's an emergency room doctor. And she lives a very hectic lifestyle, constantly on the go. You know, she jokes that the house that she lives in, she doesn't really live in it. She's there to sleep and to change her clothing and shower, and that's pretty much it. Most of her time is spent at the hospital. What you find out at the beginning but don't find out the particulars of is that something happened to Katie months earlier. So she is dealing with this incident that happened, but she hasn't let her family know that something happened to her. And after talking with a psychologist, she has been given a month sick leave. So she uses part of that time to go to Colorado, of course, for Rosie's wedding. So Katie and her mom, Maggie, think that maybe Rosie's moving a little bit too fast. Rosie tends to be very impulsive, jumping from one thing to the next quite often. So Katie's sole purpose in going out there is to stop the wedding. So all this is kind of happening at this wedding, or at the lead up to this wedding in Colorado. The setting to this story was magical. That's the only word I can use to describe it. It was absolutely delightful. Some of the characters actually stay in these treehouse lodges on this resort in Colorado, in Aspen. You meet a lot of other great secondary characters in this story. It was just wonderful. This is fantastic Sarah Morgan writing. There were a lot of things that I loved about this book. One of them in particular, looking at the relationship of an older couple with Maggie and Nick. And I don't want to give anything away, but, you know, watching them interact with each other was delightful. You don't often see stories that involve people who are older, who have grown children, and I really enjoyed seeing that part of it. Watching Katie kind of work through these issues she's dealing with, and Rosie, you know, with this whole wedding thing. And I think what just made it even more spectacular for me, as great as the book was buddy reading it with some of my friends. You know, we talk every night on Voxer about, you know, what we read that day and what our thoughts were on it. And, you know, they would mention things and I'd be like, oh yeah, I didn't think about that aspect of the story or what have you, and speculating on what we thought might happen. So yeah, I really think that this book would lend itself very, very well to a book club. If you have one in your area, if you're looking for something to read. Yes, it does take place at Christmas time, but it's not overtly Christmas. You know, it's more of a winter type story, I feel, even though the Christmas holiday is, of course, talked about in the book. I ended up giving this one 4.5 stars. I absolutely adored it, and I highly recommend that you go and check it out. And the last book that I finished this week was The Highborne Housekeeper by Sarah Mallory. This is, of course, a historical romance novel. It is book number 3 in the Saved from Disgrace series, Harlequin Historical 1445. This was published this year in 2019. Goodreads average rating of 4.37 stars. I gave this one 3 stars. This was part of my 40 Years of Harlequin project. So, my thoughts on this book. I gave it 3 stars, which is an average rating from me. This book didn't blow me out of the water, but it was still an enjoyable read. So it's about a woman by the name of Nancy who is traveling for, at the time, unknown reasons during the dead of winter. And they stop at this inn and she decides to go for a walk and get some fresh air, and comes across this man laying in the woods who's been like really, really hurt. He's been beat up essentially and he's unconscious. Excuse me. So she helps kind of wake him up a bit and ends up taking him home. And when they arrive at his home, his manservant, who's the only servant in this entire estate, is sick with the flu. So Nancy and her little entourage, like her lady's maid, her driver, and there's another gentleman, they all kind of come in and take over on this household and the running of this household, and making sure both the manservant and Gabriel, who's the gentleman who she found in the woods, are kind of nursed back to health in a way. And then a snowstorm happens and it's kind of a forced confinement story. My thing with this one is that I felt a little confused at the beginning, like there was something I should know. Now, this is the 3rd book in the series, and I have not read the first 2, so maybe that was part of my problem. But I did see on Goodreads that a lot of people were saying you can read this as a standalone. I actually recommend that maybe you pick up the first 2 books first, and maybe you won't be as confused as I was. I mean, it wasn't like, oh my gosh, what's going on? I could follow the storyline, but I was meeting characters, and it felt like I should already know who they are, if that makes sense. So that was a little bit of a disappointment, and why it went down a little bit of a star rating. Like, this would have been a 3.5 star for sure, but that just had me knock it down just a little bit. Still enjoyable. I do like the Harlequin historical line. You guys know it's one of my favorites. And I did enjoy reading this one as part of my 40 Years of Harlequin project. But anyway, guys, that is all that I have for this video today. I do hope that you enjoyed it. A little bit shorter than normal, but that's okay. And yeah, until my next video, everybody, take care and happy reading. Thank you all so much for watching. Bye, guys.